Good day. This is Professor Ken Top. It's Monday, 9 November. Our last day of class is 24 November, which is a Tuesday. It's 2 weeks from tomorrow. So we have some quick work ahead of us to finish up this module in the next 2 days, and then to dive into our system architecture and enterprise infrastructure. It's going to be like a mini module. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so our first goal today is to draw out some distinctions, the last concepts in our final version of the study guide. I did post a final version of the study guide for everyone this weekend, and I wanted to make sure that we called out some details about combinational and sequential logic gate types. So that's something that comes up here and there along the way. And I also wanted to revisit the optional assignment and your solution. Most of the period today, we're going to be giving students the opportunity to share their diagrams for their solution, just to check to see what types of diagrams or structures that people are considering for their solution. If you remember, for your solution, you needed to include a compound logic gate with at least 4 logic gates. 3 of them had to be different. You had to have 3 different types, three different logic gates inside, and one of those logic gates needed to be a NAND, a NOR, an XOR, or an XNOR, one of those 4. One of the things I wanted you to see specifically is that the solution is due by 1 p.m. Excuse me, 1 p.m. Friday. So you have the rest of the week to finish the solution. However, your assessment is due very quickly. I may change this to 1 p.m. Wednesday, but basically your first attempt at the assessment needs to be complete in the next, in the next 48 hours. So if it's 1 p.m. on Monday, at a minimum, you need to log your first attempt for the Module 4 assessment by 1 p.m. Wednesday. Does anyone have any questions about that? Any questions so far? So the latest and final version of the study guide has been posted here. And we've included some additional resources related to the optional assignment. And there's one that has to do with cool videos on digital concepts, courtesy of the Learning Circuit and Element 14.
It's coming that Ken Top. Wednesday is on Veterans Day.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I think that's why we were trying to get some things done earlier this week and then give you the rest of the week to finish up with the solution. So thank you for the reminder. So I may end up adjusting the timeline to allow you until 1 p.m. Thursday then?
Yeah, that would be good.
Yes. The point is that we have to have we have to have time to review the assessment and get all the rest of the Module 4 submissions in before the end of this week. Because on Friday, we're going to be introducing Module 5 concepts. Okay? So I want everybody to know that if you've been light on your review of the materials and stuff, you want to get in a little thicker in the next couple of days. You want to spend a little more time on that. Specifically here in the references folder, you have this cool videos on digital components, and that again relates to That relates to the optional assignment, which you can do for extra credit. It's optional, meaning you don't have to do it at all. And it's actually a better resource to use than the one we covered last week for the scavenger hunt. And then there is some content that's important to review that's part of this video. It's called the transistor, and there's actually mention of a half adder and the two logic gates that are used to create a half adder. And it's very clear, it's very concise, it's very worth your time, worthwhile. And that's why it's in the references folder. Remember that if it's in the references folder, you want to learn it, know it, memorize it, scour it, investigate it, check every link, know every fact, right? If it's in the references folder, that's the stuff we expect you to know outright. And so I just wanted to call that out for you before we got started. In the resources folder, I did post remaining YouTubes from the other classes. So when we were talking about digital components part 1 and part 2, right? The intro to digital components is the part 1 of digital components. And then part 2 on the 3rd. And then we talked about complex logic gate solutions on 6 November. And I gave you a sample diagram of an option for the solution. So that's what we covered this end of last week. And it's, you know, it's good to know this. It's good if you were in the class, you participated in the class. If you weren't in the class, of course, you want to watch these, but these references are not quite so critical. The ones in the references folder you want to spend a lot of time understanding. So for the solution, for the assignment, for the optional assignment, because it's optional and because we're giving you through the end of the week for the solution, we're also giving you through the end of the week for the optional assignment. And here's the link. So in the learning circuits, this is a channel basically, and each one of these have corresponding YouTube channels. But if you go all the way back, the emphasis on this website has to do with the physical materials that are used to compose digital components. And they start off with circuit basics from the very beginning, from scratch. And they talk about series and parallel. And some of these are very, very basic information, but when you get into the place where they start talking about resistors and they start talking about specific components like a diode or a resistor or a capacitor or a FET, right? FET, FET. We talked about MOSFETs before. When you're doing the optional assignment, you want to pick one of these that looks interesting to you, and you want to kind of noodle around in here and see if there's anything in particular. You know, they talk about timers. Here's the SR flip-flop. If it's listed in our study guide, it's off limits. So, you know, the electronic components that make up a MUX would not be one of the options you could explore. But shift registers, accelerometers, anything else that you see, amps, anything that's not listed in terms of the study guide is available. Does everybody know what I mean about not listed in the study guide?
Not included.
Was that a yes? You understand or no? I need to explain.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I understand.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. I'm talking about this list right here. So in that learning circuit list, if you see something for UART, it's great to watch and it's good to know, but that's not what you'd want to use for your optional assignment. So I want you to take it a step further. You do need to know these things at a minimum. So one of the things we want to make sure everyone understands is this idea of combinational logic. So we've added one student learning objective to this last version, the final version of the study guide, right? And so I saw this and I thought, oh, I'm not sure we covered this specifically in class. That's what we're doing today. So the difference when you're working a combinational logic gate, essentially there's a link for additional information. It shows you some quick detail, but the real simple way to understand it is that a combinational logic gate is a logic gate where the outputs depend exclusively on whatever current values are being input. So it's limited to what's going into the inputs. But a sequential logic gate is a logic gate that can handle sequence or tasks, step-by-step things, and the sequence logic gates have built-in memory. So there are things that can be stored from previous operations or calculations. It's not just what's in the inputs that dictates what comes out of the logic gate. So up to this point, before we started talking about digital flip-flops and SR flip-flops and all the rest, right, memory, until that point, all the previous logic gates we talked about were combinational logic gates. Would anyone care to give me an example of any of the previous logic gates we've reviewed to this point that did before we got to the digital flip-flops? Give me one name, anyone.
No.
No. Okay. Have we reviewed what a NAND does?
Yes.
Okay. Does a NAND have built-in memory? Okay, LaQuinn, now you can say that word again.
No.
No.
NOR. No.
That's right, exactly. Yes, the NAND does not have built-in memory, right? So what's an example of a combinational logic gate? NAND, NOR, XOR, XNOR. What about MUX? Did we review MUX before we reviewed DFF?
Yes.
Yes, we did. Okay. So MUX and DMUX would be examples of combinational logic gates. But the moment we get to the place where we're starting to talk about the capacity to remember and a DFF is involved, anything that has a DFF and the register component, right? If you combine those two, now you have memory. Now you can include previous values that were stored, including what's coming into the inputs. So those are sequential logic gates. So in the broadest of terms, you can classify all logic gates into one of two types. The basic types that only put out based on what's put in, and that's it, right? And then you have these sequential logic gates that involve the use of memory. So you can do tasks, you can follow a step-by-step sequence, you can do orderly operations. The whole idea of sequence becomes possible because you can store the results of a previous step, right? Or a previous operation. So put another way, they can process steps in a sequence. They can follow steps in a sequence. So if it has memory built in, then it's a sequential logic gate. That's the acid test. I could give you an assessment item that says, you have just invented, or your partner has just invented, a new experimental logic gate, which includes built-in memory. Which type of logic gate did your partner invent? And then I'll list combinational, and I'll list sequential, and then I'll list logical. I'll try to throw you, right? I'll try to trick you. Don't be tricked, right? Just remember that if it has memory, it can do steps in a sequence, and that's sequential. Everybody got that? Any questions about sequential and what we had before?
Yes. Is on CCC is on sequential logic gate involves steps. Those sequential logic gate.
Okay, let me see if I heard your question correctly. Is the sequential logic gate about steps?
Involves steps.
It involves steps. Yes, correct. So if the criteria for a question says you need a logic gate that can process steps of a process, that's a great question, LaQuinn, and that's a good, I might even use that for a question because it's very sensible, right? You need a logic gate that can handle or process the steps in a sequence. Would you use combinational logic gates or sequential logic gates? And the answer would be sequential. Does that answer your question, LaQuinn?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions about the difference between the two broad categories of logic gates? Now, they don't, your author doesn't spend a whole lot of time on that. And actually, when you start watching some of the videos from the learning circuit, they mention, something about combinational and sequential. But they only mention it briefly. And then I thought, okay, yeah, we're at that tipping point, because the moment you talk about DFF, that's the first, that's where memory comes in. Whenever you have a logic gate that has memory, it has that DFF, it has the mux, the two together make that memory. It's the 1-bit register. Bingo, that's the big magic, big bang moment. That's when you become a sequential logic gate, right? And I almost, my regrets, but I almost forgot to mention that. Now it's a specific student learning outcome, right? So when you see that when you see questions that have to do about which type of logic gate of the two main types, you need to know what they are and how they differ, okay? That's what contrast means. So the word contrast means, how do two things differ? And so you'd say, well, a combinational logic gate has no memory. It cannot process steps. It does not store previous results. A sequential logic gate, on the other hand, does have memory. That's how it differs from a combinational. The word contrast. When you compare two things, a lot of people use the word compare and contrast, and then they only talk about how things are the same. If you're comparing two types of things, you're looking at how they're the same. If you're contrasting two different things, then you're looking at what makes them different. So compare is what they have in common. Contrast is what's different between them. Okay? And we're keyed on what's different. Okay. So, any other questions about this particular concept? Or about what's expected? So we do not have class on Wednesday. We do want you to engage the assessment before you finish this solution, or if you're interested in the optional assessment, right? You can, the optional assignment, you can turn that in later in the week. We want to be able to review your assessment. I may just post a video on Wednesday and say, when you finish, click on this link, and these are the assessment items in the module. But we'll see. We'll see how everybody does. So, yeah, there is a fantastic video that talks about the different transistors, the PNP and NPN, and how they open and close to let electricity start or stop. And so there are some extra links, and I want you to be sure that you take the time to click every separate link you see anywhere, either in the study guide or in any addendums that we put out. Okay? Do we have an addendum here? No, we didn't. We didn't have an addendum yet. So we just have the study guide. Any questions before we get started? All right, so nobody's going to be shocked if they get a notice for an assessment, right? Everyone's ready. Okay, what are we going to do next? We are going to look at your drawings. So in the time remaining, it's now about 1:30. What I'd like you to do is to start drawing what you think you'd like to do for your solution. If you're going to be finished by the end of the week, the first step is to have a decent drawing. And we need to jumpstart that right here and right now. So if you would, please get a pencil, piece of paper, whiteboard with a dry erase marker or a stylus, and then a tablet that you can draw with. And if you want, we can do it live interactively. You can say, oh, I want to draw a diagram. I want a complex logic gate, and I want to use these logic gates. And I can guide you with questions through that process. If anyone's interested in being the volunteer to walk through the process with me in front of the class. Do I have any volunteers to, or does anybody have a drawing that they've been noodling with they'd like to share? It's awfully quiet. Should I ask you to email me your drawings? And then I do them anonymously like I did before? Would that be helpful?
Yes. Yes, Dr. Kenta.
Okay. Okay. All right. How about if I just pause the recording for 10 or 15 minutes and then, or 5 or 10 minutes, and then people can email me drawings. How's that? And then I won't reveal the names. I'll just grab the pictures and we'll display them, and then we'll walk through we'll step through it together. Does that work?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to pause the recording.